Hello guys, and welcome to part 2 of a free part tutorial series that I've put together for one of my Instagram scenes that I did. So I'm going to be showing you how to do this. This is part 2. If you haven't already seen part 1, you can check the description for part 1. And I'm also making these blend files available on my Patreon, which you can also check down in the description. It's also a great way to support the channel. So once again, I did mention in part 1, this is a little bit more of an advanced tutorial because of the animation and at the speed at which I work. But if you've got a basic understanding of Blender and you've been doing it for a bit, you should be okay. So see how you go. So let's get into this part 2. Okay, so welcome to part 2. And I know I said in part 1 we'll do the animation next, but I think it'll be easier if we actually do some of these materials first and just get them out of the way with. So what we're going to do is just quickly go over to our render settings here. And under, you can see here I'm at EV, but I'm just going to enable ambient occlusion and screen space reflections. And once you've done that, you can work in cycles if you want to. We're going to just select the bread here and just go into our UV editing workspace here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit A to select all of this geometry. And in my front orthographic view, I'm going to hit U for unwrap, and I'm going to go project from view. And you can see this guy here is being projected. I'm just going to scale it up over here by selecting it and scaling it up. Now this is where you'd have to go on the internet and get your own texture, so you can look for some textures. I made some of my own and I took some of my own pictures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go open here, and the first one I'm going to get is just called bread. And you're going to see an example here, and all I did is I got a picture of some bread and I just cropped it out in GIMP, and I just made this just this image here. So it's super simple. You can just get a picture of some bread on Google, just download it, and then just place this guy on top of that texture. And if you come over here, you're not going to see anything, so we just need to quickly go to our shading workspace. And we remember in part 1 we created the temporary placeholder materials. So just go to this bread material, then hit Z and just go rendered over here. Or actually just hit Z and go material preview. So you can see over here there's no texture plugged in, so let's go Shift A and search and type in texture and get a texture coordinate, and then Shift A, search, and then type in image and get an image texture. We're just going to come down here to the drop down and select that bread, your bread texture, whichever one you found. Plug the UV into the vector here, and then the color into the base color here. And now you're going to see your bread texture is being applied. You can come back to your UVs at any time and just scale this here, readjust it till it suits what you are looking for. So once you've done that, you can do the exact same thing with the crust. You can remember we also added that placeholder crust material to the crust. So let's just come here to our edge select. And what we're going to do here in our bread is we're just going to come to the bottom corner here. And we're just going to go Shift Alt, click on this edge, and it's just going to edge loop select this, or just select these 3 edges here. So this one, and this one. Then we're going to go Control E, and it's going to bring up this menu. We're just going to go Mark Seam. So it's added a seam here. Then with our face select enabled, Shift Alt, click on this face here, and it's going to loop select these faces. Then we're going to go Control Plus to go to selection. And then we're going to go U for unwrap, and then we're going to go UV unwrap. And you can see it's unwrapped it over here, but what we want to do now is we want to click on this X here, and we're going to go open. And my next image is just a picture of some bread. So I'm just going to open that up. So get that image. Whoops. Let me just get that again. I got the wrong image. It's just a picture of bread, but you can see all the crust. So I'm just going to open that one up. And then I'm just going to, with these vertices here selected in the UV editor, I'm just going to grab these guys and move them over some crust, scale them up. And then I can see over here, if I just go into material preview, we're not seeing it because we need to do the same thing we did with the bread. So just quickly go to your shading, select the crust, and let's just quickly add in an image texture. By the way, you can use node wrangler, it'll speed this up a bit, but I'm just keeping it simple for beginners. So I'm going to do that, plug that image texture into here, and then I'm going to go to the drop down and get that crust. And now we can see that crust material is being applied there. So now we have bread with crust. So that's exactly what we want. And now we are going to go to our layout here. And we're going to select our bread here. And we're going to go Shift D to duplicate. And we're going to go Z, move this guy up. And then what we're gonna do is go to our materials tab here, and we're gonna go and get rid of these two materials here, go new, and let's just call one of these bread underscore, and we're gonna go toast or toasted. And then we're gonna click on a plus again, go new, and let's just call this one crust underscore toasted. So let's just grab the bread material, let's give it a viewport display color. So we're gonna make it a little bit darker, bread. Then grab the crust here and make it a darker brown kind of color. Tab into edit mode, and just with that edge, that crust selected here, just make sure you select the crust toasted material and assign it. Tab out of edit mode, and what we have now is two different versions. We have an untoasted version and then a version of the bread that's toasted. With the toasted version here, all we have to do is go to our shading workspace. Then we're going to select our untoasted bread here. So we're going to select this bread material first. Then we're going to select all of these nodes here. We're going to right click and we're going to go copy. Then we're going to select our untoasted bread here, or our toasted bread. We're going to go to the bread toasted material. Select these nodes, go X and delete, then right click and we're going to go paste. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go Shift A, search, get a color ramp node, put it in between the bread and the principal, and then we're going to come here, select this slider here. Let's make it kind of like a darker kind of brown, and then grab this guy here and just kind of make it a little bit less black, maybe like a really, really dark brown. Today we're going to hit Z, go into our viewport display. So you can see here we have a darker toast, and obviously we probably don't want it this toasted, so I'm going to make it a little bit lighter here, this value. So just make it look toasted. So we're using the exact same image texture for this guy here, but we're just making the values a little bit darker and a little bit more reddish kind of brown. We're then going to select the crust over here, select these nodes, hit X and delete, right click, and we're going to go paste. And then all we have to do here is come to the texture and get that crust image. So you can see here crust toasted. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go Shift A again, type in color and get the color ramp, put it in between the image and the principled, and let's make this crust texture here darker. So we're going to make it like a bit of a darker kind of brown, bring down that value like this, and mess around with the slider. So you can see what we have here. So if we go back to my layout, let's go to material preview. You can see here we have one version of the toast that's using, both of them are using the exact two images, but they have different values applied to those images. So this one's darker and this one's lighter. So this one is going to be the toast that comes out, and this one's going to be the fresh slice of bread that goes in. I hope that wasn't too complicated if you're new to nodes. So I am trying to just explain that as quickly as I can because of time constraints, but I hope you guys are able to kind of just grasp what I was just showing. So now that we have that part done, we can get into the animation, and then we'll finish off the materials, the lighting, and obviously do our final render. Okay, so to do our animation, what we're going to do is we're going to start by grabbing our untoasted bread here. I'm going to come here to our timeline, and this time we'll leave it at 250 frames. So let's just drag this little slider here to frame 20. And on frame 20, with this bread selected, we're going to go G, Z, and bring it down. And by the way, if you could work in your camera view, this would be very advantageous. So you can kind of see what it's going to look like. So we're going to just go and bring it down on the Z axis till it's embedded inside of the toaster here. We're then going to hit I. Oh, sorry, we don't actually want it embedded in the toaster. We just want to bring it so it's actually sitting in the resting position. So when you put the toast in the toaster, the bread, how it initially sits. So that we want on frame 20, about here. We're going to hit I. So hit the I key and insert a location keyframe. You can now see you have the little yellow marker here. We're going to drag this slider to frame 40. And on frame 40, we're now going to go G, Z, and drag this down, embedding it inside of the toaster. We're going to hit I with it still selected and insert a location keyframe, leaving a marker on frame 40 now. Let's just also come over to frame 80 quickly and just hit I again and insert a location key. That's just going to give us a reference point there. So I know it seems like a bit of a redundant hold, but with that done, what we're going to do is we're going to select this toasted version of the bread up here, and we're going to go G, Z, and we're going to bring it down, and we're going to embed it inside of the toaster here. And we're going to hit I and insert a location keyframe and try and put it right on frame 80 if you can. So just put that keyframe on frame 80. We're going to put a location for it inside of the toaster. We're then going to come to frame 88. And on frame 88, we're going to go G, and we're going to go Z and bring this guy up to about here and go I into the location keyframe. And then we're going to go up to frame 95 and then go G, Z, bring it down and put it about here. And then go I and insert a location keyframe. So what you should see is this. It pops up and kind of settles down. Now on frame 90, we could actually go G, Z and bring it up a little bit more. Maybe hit I and insert a location keyframe. Come to frame 89 and bring this up even a little bit more to create a bit more of a dramatic jump. Hit I, insert a location keyframe. So you should see something like that. So that looks okay to me. You can refine that as much as you want in the animation curves. But we're also then going to come to frame 130. And on frame 130, we're going to hit I and insert another location keyframe, giving us a hold between 95 and 130. And then what we want to do is we want to come over to frame 150. And on frame 150 of this toasted version selected, we're going to go G, Z, and bring it up till it's outside of our camera view up here somewhere. And we're going to hit I and insert a location keyframe. And that's it for that toast. So this is what we're going to see. If we go to frame 1 and we hit the spacebar to play this, we should see our toast going down. And then we're going to see the toast pop up. And then it goes up. But now that's where we need to grab this guy here. So grab the rod here. And what we need to do is we need to come to frame 100. And on frame 100, we want to go G, Z with that rod selected and bring it up so it's outside of our camera view here. We want to hit I and insert a location keyframe. We then want to come over to frame 120. Precisely on frame 120, we want to go G, Z, bring this guy down. Go to your right orthographic view if it helps. So bring it down till it's sitting right on top of here. Okay, so kind of where that section interacts there, that's where you want it to stop. And with this rod selected, we're going to hit I and insert a location keyframe on frame 120. So in our camera view, this is what we should see. We should see it coming down. And then we want to come to frame 130, and with that rod still selected, we want to hit I and insert a location key, just creating a little bit of a hold there. And then between 130 and 150, that is the same time our toast lifts, so we want to do the same thing with the rod. So let's go G, Z on frame 150, bring this guy up like so. Go to your right orthographic view if it helps, and make sure that this guy is kind of resting at the same position it did at the bottom. Hit I and insert a location keyframe. You don't have to be too precise with this. In fact, I'll just quickly show you it. Even in your camera view, that looks pretty convincing. So you can see that. So let's just go back to frame 1, hit the space bar and just see what it looks like. So toast goes down, it gets toasted, it pops back up. This guy comes, grabs the toast and takes it out. What we now want to do is we want to actually come and select our original untoasted version. So come back to the very beginning here to frame 20. And we actually want to select this guy here and try and select it on frame 20 and hit Shift D to duplicate it. And with this new duplication still selected, we actually want to select these two keyframes here, 40 and 80, and hit X down here and delete those keyframes. And we want to take this frame here, frame 20, and we want to go G, and we want to drag this guy all the way up to here. In fact, take it right up to frame 120. So you can just hit G, take it to frame, 220, not 120, but frame 220. And I know this is working a little bit backwards, but then what we're going to do if this new duplication still selected, make sure it's still selected, is we're going to come over and drag our slider to frame 180. And then we're going to go G, Z, and we're going to bring this guy up till it is rested right where this toasted version is up here. Kind of nested right up in there. So it's almost right on top of this one here. And that's on frame 180. And then we're going to hit I, and we're going to insert a location keyframe there. Now I know that is a little bit backwards, but what's going to happen now is this new duplication of our original toast or untoasted bread is going to come down and be placed in the original position. So all we have to do now is select the rod here. And with that rod selected, we can come over to frame 150 and select this keyframe here and hit Shift D to duplicate it. And we're going to create a hold up until frame 180. So there we have a hold. And then between 180 and 220, which is our new drop down position of our duplicated untoasted bread, we're going to hit G, Z, and bring this guy down to where it originally was. Now, an easier way to do that is with that rod selected, just simply duplicate the first keyframe we created on frame 100 for that rod, hit Shift D, and drag it all the way across to 220. So now it'll come back down exactly where it was. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so I messed something up here. What we actually need to do is we need to duplicate a frame from frame 120. So that rod selected, we're going to come here to frame 120 and select this keyframe here, hit Shift D, and drag that one to 220. Okay, so now that should look correct. Let's have a look. Okay, now that should come down in the original position. Okay, so that's all looking a lot better. But then all we have to do as well is when that new slice of bread comes down and it lands there, we also want it to come up to frame, we also want to come up to frame 250 again. So let's just go G, Z on 250 and bring this guy up to the top again and hit I and insert a location keyframe. So I know that was a little bit tricky, but what we should see now, if we go to frame 1 and we go to camera view, is we should see this. Toast goes down, it gets toasted, this thing comes, grabs it up again, and then it puts in a fresh sheet of bread, goes up again, and the whole simulation starts again as a loopable animation. Now, one more thing we can do is select this little nub here, this little slider thing that brings the toast down. And let's just quickly sync that with the toast. Let's come to frame 20 with this guy selected. Let's hit I for location to insert a location keyframe. And we can see this guy goes down to at 40. So let's come to our front orthographic view and just bring this little guy down to the bottom here and then hit I and insert a location keyframe for that. And let's see if that matches with our toast. So it does. And then we want to wait till it pops up. So it pops up at 80. So at 80, let's insert a keyframe. For that guy, we're going to hit I and insert a location keyframe. And then we can see it pops up here up to 90. So let's come to frame 90 and then go select this keyframe on frame 20, Shift D, duplicate it, and drag it to 90 so it goes back to its original position as the toast pops up. Okay, so now we fixed that little issue there. Now to add one more level of realism, we can grab this guy here, go to our shape keys here, click on the little plus, click on it again. So now we've got a shape key created. We can tab into edit mode. And with this bar or this grabber claw here selected, we can go and hit G, Y, and move it out like this, and then hit tab out of edit mode. Now we have this key 1, and it's going to be a keyframe slider. So we've just moved it in edit mode here on that shape key 1, and now it'll create a value between the basis, which is our original, and our key shape here, which is this guy here. So now we have a slider to kind of fake this thing coming out, and we don't have to do any sort of rigging for that. So let's just try and match this little slider up with our animation. So what we're going to do here is we're going to come into our camera view quickly, and we're going to drag for here till we come to the first point where this guy comes down and makes contact with the bread. In this case, it's frame 120. So on frame 120, we're going to come over here, make sure this value slider is all the way up to 1, and then click on this little dot to insert a keyframe for this slider. And then we want to come to frame 125 and drag this all the way down to 0, and then hit this little guy here to insert a keyframe. So what's happening is coming down and then closing in on this, and then it's going to go all the way up like this, still holding onto it. So let's just come to frame 160 and click on this keyframe here just to add a keyframe for a value of 0 as well. And let's keep working our way through. So we want it to stay like that all the way till it comes to 220. So let's add another keyframe there. So it probably makes this one here redundant, but don't worry too much about it. So now we are going to come to 225 and then bring it down to 0. Or bring it up to 1 again and then hit the little shape key here. Just so it kind of opens up as it lets go of the bread and goes up again. So I know that was maybe a little bit tricky, but that one little detail is going to make it look like this. So if we go now to frame 1, hit the space bar, it's going to go down like this. Now the claw is kind of opening up, grabbing it, taking it up again, and then the whole thing repeats, brings a little slice down, and the whole thing should look relatively seamless. So I know the animation is probably the trickiest part out of all of this because there's a lot of back and forth, and sometimes it can be quite hard to explain this to people. I mean, it's quite difficult to do it and teach it at the same time. So I hope you guys were able to follow along, but hopefully the blend file I'm providing on my Patreon can help out with that. So now we can finally get into our lighting and materials and make this look really cool as a final render.